Talking about small businesses, I think this is a perfect transition we're talking about Supreme Court. Supreme Court made another decision that affects small businesses. Yeah, Supreme Court were busy this week. There was actually a couple of other big things that happened in the Supreme Court, but I kind of limited it to these. Maybe we'll get into them in future weeks. But the Supreme Court rules in favor of web design. So this is an article from NPR. Links all in the description if you want to check it out. Supreme Court rules in favor of web designer who refuse to work for same-sex weddings. So what pretty much happened is there was a Colorado web designer that was approached to create a website you're promoting gay weddings, and they refused because it was against their values, and then they were sued over it. Now, it obviously made its way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court overruled it and said a web designer has a freedom, and I think it came down to some artistic, thing that some artistic clause or something like that, because they're a web designer. But they ruled in favor of the web designer and said, no, if the web designer doesn't want to create it, that they don't have to. Dr. Rod, now, luckily this was around web design. We obviously, a few years back, was this bakery that was in trouble because they refused to do a wedding cake for a gay couple and stuff like that. So there is a risk for business owners, Christian business owners. There's a risk for us that if we're asked to do something that is outside of our values, there's a risk for us being sued. Now, the lucky thing is this was web designer, so it fell within some artistic clause or something like that. However, what if it was something else? How should we as Christians, because obviously this Supreme Court ruled in favor of us and we're like, yay, I'm like, no, we should be warned that more of this stuff is coming, but how do we stand up against this stuff?
Well, standing up against it is pretty tough because you could lose your business. You've got to. I think this has to be an individual decision, and it needs to be prayerfully made.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of comments though that I think are worth making. A number of cases like this have actually succeeded in the courts in the United States, and the basic ruling is that people have religious freedom. They have freedom of thought and freedom of religion. Philosophically, if we don't have freedom of thought and freedom of religion, we really do not have a civil society.
Yep.
And I think that's fundamentally important to understand. Civil society depends upon us having freedom of thought and freedom of religious expression. That's a philosophical point. From a practical perspective, any kind of economic transaction that we enter into has two parties who effectively have a contract. On one side of the contract is somebody who's making an offer to sell, and on the other side of the contract is somebody who's making an offer to buy. Both parties must have the freedom to say, I'm not going to pursue this contract. Otherwise, the economic system falls apart.
Yeah, here's the thing. On that, we should have the freedom to say no. Now,
Exactly.
I've worked with gay people before. I've got no problems with them. I've had good friends and everything. I don't agree with what they do, but our business dealings wasn't promoting their values, wasn't like there wasn't anything that was out of alignment with my values in the business dealing that we had. Now, that being said, I've refused to do business with Christians before just because I didn't feel comfortable doing business with them, right? And so we, like, I'm trying to kind of just remove the religious part of it out of it. Is like, me as a business owner, I should have the right to refuse to do business with someone that I just don't feel comfortable doing business with, whether they're Christian or not. That at the core of it, I should be. Now, you're saying, with you saying like we have the right to do that, who says we have the right? Where is that law? Is that like, where's that protected? Are we actually protected for that? Or is that just your opinion? Is that just an economic theory? Like where is that, kind of founded?
Well, it differs in different countries.
Yeah.
Here in Australia, of course, there's never been legislative protection of freedom of religion, and Australia has never signed up to the United Nations Declaration or anything like that. So freedom of religion in Australia is a fairly tenuous thing, and always has been from a legal perspective. It's very different in the United States, where there appears, at any rate, to be constitutional protection for freedom of thought and freedom of religion. And of course, it's been proscribed by some courts and by legislation and so on. But it does seem to me that there are more and more cases being won in favour of the right of individuals to exercise their decisions based on their religious beliefs. And I think that's really, really important. So, as I say, there's the philosophical notion that each of us must be free to think and to act on the basis of our religious beliefs. And on the other hand, our economic system actually depends upon the two parties to any contract being able to say no to the contract.
Yeah. So
in other words,
but on that point, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, you just said, like, it depends on two parties being able to say no to a contract, to agree or disagree on a contract.
Oh, but we're not talking about a formal contract. There's an implicit contract.
No, yeah, exactly.
Right?
But like, where
sometimes
is that
there's a formal contract, say business to business transactions. But look, when I go to a supermarket to buy my toothpaste, implicitly there's a toothpaste manufacturer who's making me an offer.
Yeah.
You hand over a certain amount of money and I'll let you have my toothpaste. All right?
Yeah.
Theologically, what's happening is, when I take that tube of toothpaste, I'm diminishing somebody, and that's why I pay money for it, because I repair that diminution of that person. But you see, the toothpaste maker should have the option of saying, no, I don't want to sell to you. You're too tall. I don't sell to tall people. Well, good on them. I can go and buy toothpaste from somebody else. Now, the only time that it becomes a real issue, of course, is when I don't have the option to go to somebody else. And that's been the case, say, in the case of social media. I am conservative. Maybe even some people would say I'm right wing. I'm certainly a believer in the Word of God. Some people would probably say I'm fundamentalist. Well, good on them. But you see, the idea of freedom in the economic realm is that we'll always be able to go to somebody else who will want to do that contract with me. So in the case of web design, if somebody says, I don't want to do your web for you because I don't agree with your expression of human sexuality, fine, go and find someone else who will. That's the point I'm making. And that's why it is so important. It's fundamentally important to the effective working of the economic system that we have that freedom. There needs to be a degree of sovereignty on both sides of the deal. This is not a legal issue. I'm talking about what makes the economic system work to deliver human flourishing. And I consider myself an expert, right?
Yes.
I consider myself an expert because I've been in economics for over 40 years.
Yeah. And I agree. Like, it should be, free commerce, right? Like there really should be an ability to be able to buy, sell to whoever we want to, like, choose, do that. But what's the protection? Like, that's the thing. Like, we as business owners,
Oh, look, there's not always protection. That's why we have these court cases where someone is sued because they won't provide a product or a service to somebody, and a court then says, well, okay, we don't agree that you should be discriminating on grounds of a person's expression of human sexuality or whatever. But they tend to be the most common. But my view is that, of course, we should be able to do that. But for the system to work, though, it does depend on you being able to go to find someone else who will contract with you. And that's not always the case, where you have what we call monopolies or monopolistic competition, where there's only one or two providers. And that doesn't work well for the economy. It doesn't work well to deliver human flourishing, because it allows one or a few large companies to acquire a lot of profit, a lot of wealth over time, and at the same time exploit everybody, their workers, their customers, and so on. So we need a very high degree of what we economists would call competition in an economy, because that actually drives out opportunities to make what we call above normal profits or unreasonable profits. It drives out the opportunity to exploit workers and to exploit customers. But also, by the way, it needs to be underpinned by Christian ethics, a concern for the poor, a determination to use accurate weights and measures, for example. Look, we could spend days and days talking about this. And of course, with some colleagues, I developed a whole undergraduate degree, biblical business. It was a Bachelor of Business in a Christian higher education provider. We developed a whole undergraduate degree and a whole Master of Business Administration program based on these ideas.
So I like that. So I was trying to lean towards what's warnings for us as business owners to avoid this, but you've kind of flipped it on its head. It's like, this isn't actually a warning. This is a rally cry. This is
I guess it is.
Christian business owners, business leaders, step up. Don't play small. Build something big. That's how, like, if we are worried about us being in control, or being controlled by these big organizations or having to make, being forced to run our business a certain way, well, be big enough so that you can be a big player and fight against them and be a good alternative, be a good influence on the industry, be a good influence on your community. Rise up. This is a rally cry to business owners. Take this as a warning, not as a warning to cower back. This is a warning. They're making decisions against business owners. Now, they're in our favor right now, but we need to rise up so we're big enough so that we can be influential in these situations, so that we can be the positive alternative, not be crushed by other monopolies. So, Dr. Rod, I think that's a good place to transition into our next spot, because I think there was there's so much more I'd love to delve into on that topic with you, Dr. Rod. I think we can maybe leave that to another day. I actually do feel like there is a lot to talk about when it comes to, obviously, your missional business that you're big into, as well as all the just commerce itself and how we navigate that place. But we should be free. This is how commerce works. We should have the freedom to be able to supply or purchase from whoever we decide.
Well, Craig, just if I may make one further comment, human freedom is a deeply Christian idea. There is very little human freedom
I
before
love it.
Christianity came on the scene.
Yeah.
That's why Christians have been champions of freedom of speech and freedom of religion,
Mm.
and also a proper separation of state from religion.
Yeah.
We don't want a state religion. We want
Mm.
people to be free to choose, because when all said and done, when Jesus called people to follow him, it was an invitation. It was not a command. Jesus invites us.
Mm.
And fundamentally, freedom of thought, freedom of religion, it's a deeply Christian idea. And it was a radical idea that was brought to the world by the early Christian church.
Mm. And you've got really the two sides. You've got the freedom that is offered by Jesus and Christianity, and then you look at the alternative of that, and that is oppression. The devil is just trying to oppress us and enslave us. So yeah, I do like those two contrasts, that Christianity and if you're a leader, let's look at that as the fundamental foundation that you should be aiming for. Is you should be looking at freeing the people under you and offering freedom, not enslaving the people underneath you. Otherwise, you're not Christian. That's just the way it is. Hey, that was an excerpt from our On the Cube Leadership podcast. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, put a comment below. And if you want to see more content like this, faith-based leadership development content, make sure you check out our channel, give it a subscribe, and hit the bell notification so that you'll be notified when we release new content.